Okay, thanks, Linda. I'd like to welcome everybody to Growing Concerns for May the 21st. As usual, we're going to start with a bit of a crops update. Not a whole lot of big news in the update regarding seeding and just the growing of the crop issues, but we'll go through a few things that we've seen over the past week. Then after that, we're going to have Nasir, Shaikh on, and he's our weed specialist, and he's going to talk a little bit about the effects of the cool weather we've been having and on weed development and on control measures. So as producers are going out there doing their burn-offs and spring weed control, they have a few more tips in their book for controlling some of the harder to kill weeds. And then we're getting to crunch time for some of the soybean growers, and so I thought it would be good to maybe have some tips on planting the 2014 soybean crop, and we've got Elmer going to be on, and he's going to talk a little bit about some things to look for when you're seeding and maybe some do's or don'ts. So I guess with that, we'll get going. And I guess seeding has started through most of the Southwest here. We had a few days last week that help producers get out on the land and help them, and we were able to get going and get some seeds in the ground. The amount seeded is still fairly low in the Southwest here. I would be surprised if we were much over 10% seeded, and mainly because of wet conditions still. It's just been producers that have been out there have been having to pick the fields they can go on, and even those fields, in some cases, they're having to leave a fair bit, just because of the fact that things haven't had a good chance to dry out, and soil temperatures are still fairly cool, and frost levels in the ground are still fairly high, so moisture just still hasn't had a chance to go down. This is what some of the fields look like as of yesterday. I was out trying to get a few pictures for today, and we had rainfall, I guess Sunday, Monday, throughout most of the Southwest, and it didn't seem like we got a lot of rain when you add up the totals, but you know, anywhere from the 25 to 40 millimeters, and usually that wouldn't cause all this pooling of water, but because the ground is so saturated right now, and it didn't take much for water to start pooling again, and a lot of the low spots are full again. This field was partially sown, and you can see there's going to be a while before it should dry again to get out there and continue seeding. Mentioned a little bit about the soil temperatures when we got going there, and that's one thing too that I've been noticing, that it hasn't been warming up really fast, and maybe in the next couple of days here, when we're going to be getting some warm weather in the mid-20s, we'll see that soil temperature warm up, but still soil temperatures, when you do the average of a morning and evening temperature, you're still in that 7 to 8 degrees, so nothing overly warm for quick germination or quick jump out of the ground for anything that we're planting right now. I imagine most of the crop that's been planted is going to sit there for a while until we do get some warm weather. I mentioned before that we're going to be providing this on a weekly basis for everybody in the region, and it's basically from information from our weather stations, and there's quite a few areas where we report from in the Southwest, and just some key points when you look at rainfall amounts. This tells us where we're sitting compared to normal, and when you look through most of them, we're in the definitely over our normals. When you look at the one Killarney right here, where it's only 60% of normal. So, in talking to a few people down in that area, they've got a fair bit more seeding done, and they actually on the weekend only got a little bit of a sprinkle, enough to settle dust, from talking to some producers in that area. So they're actually probably going today again. So. But then you look in some of the other areas like Minnedosa, where reporting 198% of normal. So we definitely have some areas where and when you look at the stretch that Mike talked about last week that was going to kind of go up the middle of the province, it looks like those areas definitely received higher amounts of moisture and are definitely sitting with some wet conditions right now. When you look at our corn heat units, this gives you the percentage of normal as well, and you can definitely see from there that we're falling behind in our heat units or our percent of normal because we just haven't had the warm weather yet, and you look at that in our growing degree days, we're falling behind right now too. So it's a good piece of information to be following on a weekly basis just to see where we're sitting and be able to compare it to what we would be normally. I wanted to throw this up because I think as we're kind of approaching crunch time on some of the crops that we're looking at growing, especially corn and soybeans in the southwest here. We do have some deadlines coming up through crop insurance for full coverage, and for all the corns, whether grain corn, and for soybeans, we're looking at May the 30th. So we're looking, basically we got a little bit better than a week to 10 days sort of here where we need to be getting those crops in. So hopefully if the warm weather sticks around here by the weekend, we could be out there back in the fields, and if it does get some heat there, we could be looking at seeding into some warmer temperatures. If now these dates are for full coverage like in the southwest part of the province. If you're on the east side of the province, there are some later dates, and you need to check with MASC on those deadlines. But these would be more for the southwest. I put sunflowers up there because there's been getting a few calls regarding sunflowers and when we should be looking at planting them, and I know a few guys have put them in the ground already. Again, we do have some time yet with the sunflowers for our full coverage through crop insurance. Our picture on the winter wheat that's growing out there, and definitely this rain has made a big difference in the winter wheat, and even those couple days of heat that we got when we were able to be out there seeding. The winter wheat is definitely jumping and growing now, and it's easy to tell which fields are in trouble right now and which fields are going to make it, and so it's a good time to be assessing those stands right now and seeing if you have an issue and if you need to be concerned about any of your crops. But most of the ones that I've been in seem to have done okay throughout the winter and are starting to jump in and start going. But even though it's been cool, there's still a lot of weeds that are starting to come over this last little while here, and that little bit of heat we got the last couple of days there before the rain definitely got them going. So we definitely are going to be needing to be watching for these weeds. And as we get into crunch time here, I can see where producers are going to be in a little bit of a predicament as to when to do their burn-offs. And I think we definitely need to be watching what's growing out there, and to just be aware that the weeds are there. And that's kind of why we got Nasir to come on today, because we felt that it would be a little bit of an update as to what to do with some of this cool weather control and what stage some of these weeds are actually in. So I guess, Linda, with that, maybe we'll turn it over to Nasir and let him go through his presentation.
Okay, Nasir, whenever you're ready, you need to click the button that says Show My Screen.
Okay.
Okay, great.
Is it showing my screen?
Yes, it is. You just need to start. There you go. Go ahead whenever you're ready.
Okay. Okay, good morning, everybody. Thanks, Lionel, for inviting me for this webinar. The topic of my presentation today is the effects of cool weather on wheat development and control measures. Every year is a different year, and as you can see, like, we had a long, cold winter, and it looks like now we have a long, cold, and wet spring. So it has been a challenge this year. Most of the seeding is kind of struggling, kind of lagging behind a little bit, I would say. And it's still quite wet, most of the places in Manitoba. But hopefully things improve and the weather gets warm. So on that note, I'll move forward. The outline of my presentation would be basically I'll be talking a little bit about weather. Lionel covered quite good on that southwest portion of the province. I'll cover the overall picture of the province and cool weather and the weed development and what can be the issues that can come into it. And then what are the weeds of the cool and wet conditions identification. I may not talk too much details, but I will kind of highlight what are the key weeds that are kind of up and going, and then the control measures and some of the issues relating to the control measures. This is the overall map of Manitoba. The temperature right now over the last close to 3 weeks, I would say, is well below normal. This is the average temperature, and as you can see, even the average temperature is below the average of the last 30 years. So it's kind of a significant thing that the temperature in some parts of the province, like over here, is like close to like below 5 degrees of the normal average. And most of the province, as you can see, it is below that average temperature. In some places, anything from like 2 to 4 and so on. Overall rainfall, as Lionel mentioned, yes, we did get a bunch of rainfall. In some of the pockets, we did get a fairly significant amount, like around 70 to 80 mm. Whereas in most of the other parts, especially what Lionel was talking in the southwest portion, it's about 40 to 50 mm. And like in this area, it is even higher, about 50 to 60 mm. And there is some less rainfall in this area, but it's still good to keep the soils wet. Since the temperatures are not very high, it's not drying out very quickly. So moving on to weed development. What is weed growth? Hang on, I'll remove this thing off my screen so you can see the screen better. So what is weed growth and development? What makes some weeds more competitive than others? And why are some weeds more prone to resistance? So the answer to all these three questions is basically one. It's just weed biology. So weed biology is the key factor which kind of controls all these things. And a good understanding of weed biology is essential for not only understanding the weeds, but also kind of designing weed management programs that can be most effective and can attack the target weeds at the most appropriate time to get the maximum benefit out of the weed control program. The weed biologically basically has three components. The weed emergence pattern, which we are currently dealing with in the fields. I want to change the colors of the screen to, I don't know what that is.
Nasir, Nasir, the next time that comes up, you just choose the bottom option, okay? And it won't come up again.
Okay. Yeah, so talking about weed biology, yeah, I was talking about weed emergence patterns. This is what I'll be talking a little bit more about. The growth and the reproduction, I may not talk now in the interest of time. So weed emergence, early emerging weeds are more competitive with crops, as you all know, and the late emerging weeds, they are less interfering with the crop, and also they have less reproductive success. Right now what we should be concerned about is the delayed emergence of the weeds, or the weeds which have kind of an extended period of emergence, and this allows the weeds that are emerging later to escape the control measure, and especially when in-crop herbicide applications lack residual control. So we have to have a herbicide kind of a combination which may have some residual control, especially if we are going to make some progress with weed control in crop. Then weeds that emerge throughout the growing season definitely require a residual herbicide as well, and if need be, we may need to have like 2 or more herbicide applications for the weeds which emerge throughout the growing season. Then what we are dealing with right now is the weed development under the cool conditions. Right now, most of the winter annuals are up and growing. They are growing pretty good, I would say. The weeds will grow slow, but they will grow for sure, and they will have a competitive advantage over the crop, as I mentioned earlier. So all these cool, wet conditions will lead to basically late planting, as we can see in most parts of the province. There is reduced tillage, or I would say there is hardly any tillage. In light soils, there are guys who are doing some kind of a light harrowing just to kind of dry out the soil and get the seeding done. But overall, there is reduced tillage, and there will be also late or missed herbicide applications in the coming few weeks, and also there will be poor crop completion. So what are the weeds of the cool or the wet weather that are taking advantage of these cool growing seasons? And most of these weeds are also water loving. So I'll go through a list of the ones which are kind of quite popular in or prominent in Manitoba. Among the perennials, we have curl dock. This will show up a lot this year, I would say. So watch out for this weed. The other one is absinthe. This also likes cool, wet conditions. Thistles of all kinds, whether it is Canada thistle, saw thistle, whether it is annual or perennial, then also bull thistle. So all this will be growing pretty good. Dandelions, it's up and growing in a lot of parts of the province, and in fact I have seen a bunch of them even flowering. So though it is slow, but it is on the move. So I keep the current color scheme and don't show this message again. That's right? Yeah. Hello?
Yes, go ahead, Nasir.
Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. Just to make sure, yeah. The other weed that may be there is green fox, is foxtail barley. This is a weed which loves water or waterlogged conditions a lot. It's usually found in fields which has a little salty condition, also alkaline or saline soils. So this is another weed which will be growing quite well this year, especially in the wet fields. The next one is barnyard grass. It's also up and growing. Plantain, it's also up and growing right now. Among the biennial weeds, we have biennial wormwood, and this weed is not very good, especially because it has some kind of a tolerance for a bunch of herbicides like group 2, group 4, and group 5. Yeah, it has a fair bit of tolerance, so this is one weed to avoid, I would say. If possible, control it as much as possible. Stovebill is another bad weed, which is kind of growing well right now. Among the winter annuals, we have flaxweed, which is up and growing. Stinkweed, shepherd press. I had a grower who came in and he said, "Whoa, this weed is big and growing." I said, "Yeah, yeah, we need to get a handle on it pretty soon." Among the annuals, wild oats is the one which will be quite prominent this year. Canada fleabean. This is a weed usually which is found on the roadsides and along the gravel areas, but it is kind of a weed of concern because this is a weed which has developed resistance to glyphosate in Ontario, and we have quite a bit of population in Manitoba, and one has to be watchful for this weed, especially from the angle of herbicide resistance. Prickly lettuce, this is another weed which is up and growing. Cleavers, this is a weed which is kind of moving from the west side of the province. It's a pretty bad weed because if it contaminates the canola, it can have a major issue in terms of quality of canola. So one has to be very careful about having this weed control to the best possible. Volunteer or glyphosate resistant canola, and this is another weed which is kind of up and kind of growing, and it will be competing very heavily with other crops, whatever other crops you have. So this is another weed to watch out for. The other weed which I'm missing here is kochia. I saw the picture which Lionel showed, the first picture, it had a bunch of kochia growing. So kochia is another weed which is up and growing. It starts early in the season, but it grows all over the season till middle of the summer. The thing with it is, unfortunately in Manitoba, we have documented glyphosate resistant kochia in 2 RMs. So it is a weed which we'll have to be looking for, especially in terms of glyphosate resistance, since glyphosate is one of the key herbicides we have for pre-seed burn down or also in-crop applications with Roundup Ready technology. So we have to be careful about that glyphosate resistant kochia. Moving on to the control measures, issues with control measures. As you know, weed control is poor if we have a cool, cloudy, rainy weather following a burn down application, and this gets more complicated when the temperature drops below 5 degrees centigrade because there is very minimal metabolism and there is minimal absorption of the herbicide by the weeds, and the herbicide may just be sitting there. Under cool condition, there is also a potential of reduced herbicide performance, as I said, and in some situations, weed will be controlled effectively, but it may take a much longer time for the weeds to die. And in other situations, there may be a significant reduction in the weed control. The other issues are most annual weeds probably are small enough to be effectively controlled with the standard treatments. However, most of the winter annuals and perennials could pose a management problem because they are all up and kind of growing. They kind of get a head start, and in that situation probably we'll have to go with a higher rate of herbicides even in burn down applications to kind of counteract the negative impacts of the cool weather. Also under cool conditions, we'll see that there may be some potential injury to the crops, especially the crops may show some symptoms of yellowing or some symptoms of being kind of a little bit stunted, but usually those crops grow out of it. There is nothing to be concerned about. They grow out of it and there is no reduction in the yields whatsoever. The injury usually happens more if the plant is under cold stress and also there is sufficient moisture in the soil, because then in that situation there is reduced metabolism on one hand, but also increased absorption of the herbicide than the normal. The control measures to adopt would be spray when the weeds are actively growing, apply the herbicide at the growth stage most susceptible for the target weeds, use sufficient water and if possible a wetting agent if it is recommended. Timing is more important over here than the method of application. So if you need to hire a plane, do so to achieve early spray timing. And do not spray when it's very windy, especially over 15 kilometers an hour. Wait for favorable temperatures, that's the suggestion, but make sure that there is a fine balance between the favorable temperature and the size of the weeds, because we don't want to wait too long for favorable temperatures to come and then the weeds are too big to control. So make sure there is a good balance between the two. If you have to spray in cool temperatures, adjust the rate. As I said earlier, probably you'll have to go a little higher rate. And as I said, spray the temperature, spray when the temperatures are maximum during the daytime. Don't spray too early or too late in the day. And if possible, to have a tank mix with at least one herbicide, which may give some residual activity as well. So we have kind of a better control for the delayed emerging weeds, I would say. And regarding the herbicide options, we have a whole list of herbicide options. It's in the Guide to Field Crop Protection on page 54. I didn't copy paste it over here, but yeah, there's a whole range of herbicides, and you can apply at the right rate and at the right timing of the day and get the best from those herbicide combinations. And I think with that, I'll finish my presentation. If there are any questions, yeah, feel free to ask.
Excuse me, I don't have any questions at this time. Lionel, did you have anything?
Yeah, actually, I do have a couple questions for you, Nasir. Okay. First of all, would the addition of ammonium sulfate or Li-700 help in improving weed control under these conditions? Maybe a glyphosate product?
I would say yes. If it is recommended to have a additional adjuvant or additional kind of a wetting agent, yes, it is recommended to use them. It will definitely help in better weed control.
What do they actually do?
Basically, what they do is they help to kind of I would say, in other words, melt the cuticle in a way and kind of help the herbicide penetrate into the leaf, the growing leaves of the weeds. The thing with the cool weather is already the metabolism of the plant is low and the absorption is also low. So we need to get enough of the chemical into the weeds so it can kind of kill those weeds. So anything that can help to kind of get enough herbicide into the weeds will have a better weed control.
Okay, and another question for you is, the weeds that are out there right now, are they advancing in leaf stage, or are they just kind of sitting there waiting for the warm weather to grow? You look at some of them and they don't look very big, but when you look at some of the recommendations for control, they usually say, at this leaf stage. So are they still developing, or are they just sitting there?
I would say right now they are sitting there, but they are all emerging. So there is additional emerging weeds, delayed emerging weeds. They are growing very slowly right now because of the low temperatures, but the moment the warm weather hits, they will take off like crazy. And then it will become a challenge to control them because they will grow quickly. Within a week, it will be like almost going from a stage where it was recommended for control to a stage where it is kind of have very reduced efficacy of the herbicide on those weeds. That can happen very quickly. So right now they are kind of slow and sitting, but we shouldn't take them for granted.
Okay. Well, thanks, Nasir. That was some really good information regarding weed control and staging, and some real good pictures on identification. So if guys are seeing something seeing something in the field and want to just double check, they can definitely go back and look at some of those pictures you had. So thanks.
Thank you, Lionel. Yeah.
Before we switch over to Elmer, I just wanted to make one comment. We had a comment sent in from someone from the, I guess, more the eastern side of the province, and I made a comment regarding the winter wheat, and I guess my comment was more about the winter wheat in the western side of the province here that's looking fairly good right now, but the eastern side of the province has had some issues, especially in some areas where some of the winter wheat has been written off. So those areas are definitely looking at having to replant some of that winter wheat. So definitely a good observation, and just to kind of let you know how different parts of the province can be affected by the weather, and maybe some of the conditions some of those crops were sown into last fall were maybe not as ideal as in some areas. So It seems where most of the fields that I've been hearing about have been having issues were ones that didn't have good stands of stubble and didn't get the good winter snow cover, and those fields seem to be having some issues. And we do have the odd field in the southwest here that's showing some of those issues as well. We had a couple producers that sowed winter wheat into pea stubble, and again, just not able to catch good snow cover, and that's why they're running into some problems this spring with those crops. But definitely keep monitoring them, and definitely good comments. So I guess with that, Linda, maybe we'll turn it over to Elmer, and we'll get him to go through the presentation regarding the soybean tips for planting soybeans for this year.
Okay, Linda, everybody can hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you fine. Go ahead.
Okay, I'll begin then. So Lionel asked me to put together a few slides on seeding soybeans and some of the things that we should consider when we head to the field to plant. So when should we commence seeding soybeans? And basically what we like to do is consider somewhat of a balanced seeding approach. If we try to plant too early, this typically means going into cooler soils, beans coming out of the ground slowly, and if we wait till soils warm up sufficiently, often that means we're planting a little bit on the late side, and then of course we also run the risk of fall frost and the yield reductions that come with that. So basically what it comes down to is when the planting dates for soybeans, basically once we reach the ideal conditions, the planting of soybeans must take priority over virtually all the other crops. So once we get the right soil temperatures, that's when we need to get the soybeans in the ground. Here's a slide just showing why the interest in soybeans, and especially after the recent rain events we've had over this past weekend and into early this past week. You can see the standing water and how it's affected the navy beans on this half section or quarter section that was split into two, and how the soybeans were able to perform under those high moisture conditions, and the beans, navy beans, certainly did not. And it's showing all the moisture stress. I think if you replace those navy beans with a field of canola, I think you probably see similar results as well. And I think that's why we have all the interest in soybeans, and why at this point in time anyways we're expecting or estimating we're going to plant somewhere between 1.2 and 1.3 million acres. So there's certainly a lot of work to do in the next 7 to 10 days. So some soybean seeding basics. In regards to seeding depth, we want to seed shallow. Basically, we want to still seed into warm soil, so that's why we want to have them at a fairly shallow depth. But we want to have them sitting on a firm, moist seed bed as well. So that's certainly no deeper than that 1 1/4 inches, ideally that 3/4 inch. We want to target a plant population of between 180 to 210,000 plants per acre, and that will vary depending on the row spacing of your air seeder or planter. Just a graph here showing the yield curve versus plant stand per meter squared. The recommendation here is 40 plants per meter squared, and you can see from this particular graph that once we drop below the 40 plants per meter squared, we start to see an effect on yield, and so that's why the 40 plants per meter squared, or roughly 4 plants per square foot, is what we consider to be ideal for a live plant establishment. With that being said, and because there's not really an option in regards to reseed for soybeans, when we do get reduced stands, even stands that are basically 50% of what's recommended, we still can get some pretty good yields. There isn't a direct correlation between stand reduction and yield. In this particular study at the NDSU, plant stand was reduced in half, 75,000 plants per acre, and so this is mainly due to the fact that soybeans have a pretty good ability to compensate for lower plant populations by increased branching. They develop more pods per plant and seeds per pod, and also have an increase in seed weight or bushel weight. In regards to seeding soybeans, we want to basically make sure we get a pre-seed burn-off done. Soybeans are not very good competitors early in the growing season, so we want to make sure we take care of our weed issues with the pre-seed burn-off, and then usually a early Roundup application or glyphosate application shortly after emergence, and then one more probably at the typical weed control timing. We want to have our soil temperatures for planting in that 10 to 12 degree range. We want to use seed treatments, especially under these cool, wet soils. And using those types of parameters, typically that means we'll see these conditions become predominant in that May 10th to the 20th in the Red River Valley and May 15th to the 31st in western Manitoba. Just a bit more on soil temperature. Soils at 10 degrees Celsius soybeans will emerge in, it takes roughly 15 to 17 days, and we've seen that last year. A lot of the soybeans took a long time to come out of the ground, where soils at 15 degrees Celsius of soybeans will come out of the ground in 7 to 10 days. It's important when we measure soil temperature that we take an early AM and a late PM timing. What I recommend is 8 in the morning and 8 in the evening, and do this over several locations over several days. And this is because this is especially important this year, is that I think we're seeing a very slow release of the frost from the soil. And if you just go out there and take a mid-afternoon soil temperature, it's not hard to get a 10 to 12 degree temp. But when you take two temps and average that over the entire day and then do it over several locations, I think you'll find, as Lionel mentioned earlier, that our soil temperatures are probably in that 7 to 8 degree range. With the forecasted warmer temperatures for later today and later this week, hopefully we'll get those soil temperatures up to where they need to be. It's also important that within the first 6 hours of planting that the first water or drink the seed takes is warm. There's been research in Ontario demonstrated that soybeans can be vulnerable to injury from cold soil temps or water chilling during that first 6 to 24 hours after planting. And this was even true when the soil was then warmed up to about 75 degrees for the next 17 days. And the plants basically never did recover from this initial injury or chilling. And was plowing. I had a nice warm moisture there. Something that we don't necessarily like to promote, but something that maybe is a reality.
Just hang on, Elmer. I've muted you. Unfortunately, we seem to have some real problems with the sound. Just hang on. I'm going to try and correct this. Just a minute.
Can you hear me, Linda? Hello, Linda?
Hi, can you hear me now?
You bet.
We've got better sound now.
Yeah, maybe try Elmer again there.
Okay, go ahead, Elmer. Try your presentation again.
Okay, Linda. Again, this is a slide that we don't typically promote burning of stubble, but as the seeding window here closes in on the end of the month, we have to do what we have to do to get the ground ready for planting. And this is probably more so an issue as we move into some of the fringe areas where we really need to take advantage of every day of every growing degree day we can. And so areas in the parkland area where guys are trying soybeans, this may be something we'd have to look at. Often we can get somewhat of a slow burn, a cool burn, and it still leaves sufficient residue there so that the soil doesn't blow. Planting into soybeans into this type of stubble will certainly result in very quick emergence. So something to consider, not necessarily something we like to promote, but something that we have to do sometimes to get the crop in on time. As mentioned earlier, the option for reseeding soybeans isn't there, and so we have to be patient. It's certainly not uncommon as we move into even the first or second week of June that we experience a frost still. And soybeans will regrow from a frost, so it's certainly just, we're going to need some patience here to take a better opportunity to just examine the regrowth. As mentioned earlier, even a stand that's reduced will only see a roughly 20%, 10 to 20% reduction in yield. I put this slide in to remind me to mention seed moisture, and seed lots can vary in moisture somewhat, and some producers will tie a bag at the end of their air seeder openers and collect a seed sample after it's passed through the distribution system of the air seeder. And then they'll use a paddle like this and collect 50 seeds and examine them just to see the level of seed injury after it's gone through the air seeder and distribution system. And this may mean having to adjust your seeding rate accordingly depending on the amount of injury being experienced. In regards to fertility, nitrogen not recommended. If nodulation does not occur and soybeans are yellowing at flowering, we recommend a broadcast application of nitrogen beginning at around 50% pod fill is when we would recommend that nitrogen application or rescue treatment be applied. In regards to phosphorus, it's recommended at 30 to 40 pounds per acre or approximately 1 pound per expected bushel of yield. We like to see that phosphorus front-loaded in the previous crop or applied in the fall. At seeding, you can apply it, but apply it as a sideband application or as an application 1 inch directly below the seed. Potassium or potash, more of an issue on sands or sandy loams. We like to see about 30 to 60 pounds per acre of potash. Sulfur, probably in that 20 pound per acre rate is what we like to see. Generally not an issue in most of our soils, but can be if you're following planting soybeans on canola stubble. So what's missing from these roots? The obvious answer is, of course, the nodules, and we've got to make sure we get proper inoculation of the soybeans. It's a critical step. We have a lot of options. We have a liquid, peats, granular. We definitely recommend double inoculating. We feel that it's cheap insurance. Soybeans need 150 to 200 pounds per acre of nitrogen to produce a 30 bushel per acre crop. So we definitely don't want to run short. Here's just a slide showing the results of a double inoculation with the liquid or peat and the granular. The liquid or peat on the seed provides good early nodule formation around the crown of the plant. Then as the lateral roots develop, they grow into the granular band and basically results in giving us a good season-long inoculation or nodule formation and availability of nitrogen to the plant. So this is why we like to see a double inoculant program be implemented. I mentioned earlier about rescue treatments, and this is some work that John Hurd, Dennis Lang conducted. Basically what they found was that they were getting their best nitrogen response applied at pod fill, basically. So we wanted either 50 or 100 pounds of N per was applied, and basically we were seeing the biggest yield response when it was applied at that particular timing. In regards to seed treatment options in soybeans, certainly don't really recommend no seed treatment given our cool, wet soils at this time. We can go with just the fungicide treatment, and we have a couple of options here, either Apron or Evergol Energy. We have fungicide and insecticide treatment options. So Cruiser Max Vibrance and Evergol Energy Stress Shield for both wireworm and seedcorn maggot control. For the 2014 planting season, for planters, they're not allowing the talc or graphite be used anymore with the neonicotinoid seed treatments. And the new Bayer Crop Science Fluency Agent is what's being recommended as a lubricant. Important when applying the Fluency Agent that you add just the proper amount. More is not better in this case. And to mix it with the seed fairly slowly. And you shouldn't have any mixing problems or application problems if you follow that procedure. In regards to rolling soybeans, it's a must if you have any amount of stones for ease of harvesting. Most will do seeding, post-seeding prior to emergence. And we like to make sure we avoid rolling under moist, wet soil conditions to avoid soil compaction. So typically this means rolling in the afternoon, mid to late afternoon. And to plan your field operations to avoid double rolling. We've seen in some instances last year where just the actual leaving of the field with the roller and doing some double rolling, you could see that particular pass for the entire growing season. For post-emerge rolling, we like to wait till the first trifoliate and again roll under warm, dry conditions in the afternoon. So this is soybeans just breaking the ground, and this is the timing when we would certainly like to avoid or certainly not recommend at all rolling at this time because we break the hook on the soybean plant and will reduce the germination and emergence dramatically. This is the stage we like to see, that first trifoliate. And this is after one pass with the roller at that particular timing. So you can see the plants are just rolled over. Important to when you're rolling to get off the tractor and actually examine the plants and see what type of job you're doing. If you're doing a lot of damage, maybe it means having to wait a little bit longer into the afternoon when the plants are a bit more pliable. Here's a slide of a plant that was rolled at the first trifoliate. So you can see still standing upright. And here are plants that were rolled at the second trifoliate. So a little more advanced stage. And what they did was put the plants down and basically the plant never really recovered and grew with a kink in the stem. And certainly this is going to make for some problems at harvest in trying to collect the beans when having to get the knife right on the ground. So I think with that, Lionel, that's all I have. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them at this time.
I don't have any questions right now. Lionel, did you have some?
I guess one question, I guess you kind of mentioned a bit about the compaction, Elmer. What about drill-wise, say seeding and compaction? Any comments there? We might be seeding into some wet soils here. Any comments as to time of day, kind of anything you might have to add to that?
Well, I think we'd like to certainly see seeding be delayed somewhat until the soil moisture is dried up somewhat at the surface. Unfortunately, I think compaction is going to be somewhat of an issue if we want to try to get a lot of this crop seeded on time. But yeah, I think the big thing is to try to delay seeding till middle of the afternoon. I think with some of the warmer temperatures forecast for later this week, and I think once we see some of those warmer temperatures, I think we're going to really see the soil warm up, and we're going to see the frost release, and we're going to see a lot of this water drop that is presently sitting in the fields. So I think things should improve dramatically here in the next 3 to 5 days.
Okay, well, thanks, Elmer. I think that covers everything that we wanted, and thanks for the presentation. Good information. Okay, with that, Linda, if there's no other questions, I'm going to go through a few of the last slides like we normally do, giving the information as to how to contact us and how to contact us for getting credits for CCA and CEU credits. That's my contact information and Linda's contact information there. And then again, the information for the FPAs in the Southwest and South Parkland. There's myself, Elmer, Amir, and Andrea and Verdun. And then our whole crops team. So that's if you want to, in any of the areas of the province, you can contact any one of these people, and if they can't help you, I'm sure they could find people that would be capable and able to help you. So I guess with that, we'll end the webinar for today, and thanks for attending, and see you next week.